Germany has unveiled its first national security strategy, which has been years in the making. The strategy focuses on defense, resilience, and sustainability. Chancellor Olaf Scholz presented the document along with his top ministers. They said national security goes beyond the armed forces and will also include space, energy, food, and climate. They also said that the strategy will work to strengthen defense against espionage and sabotage. So let's have a listen to what the German Chancellor and the German Foreign Minister had to say.
In the negotiations on the formation of the coalition, we had agreed that we would work up such a national security strategy together. This was before the Zeitenwende, the turning point in history, before the invasion in Ukraine, before the brutal war of aggression that has since been raging in the Ukraine, and before the explosion of the Nord Stream pipelines. I emphasize all these events to make clear how strongly the security environment has changed for Germany in the past 1.5 years. Despite all changes, it remains the core task of the state to ensure the security of all of us. Had to learn with the brutal war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine that freedom and peace do not fall out of the skies. And this is why the Federal Chancellor and the Bundestag have ensured that we make more money available for the German Federal Armed Forces. The Minister of Defense will talk about that, because a secure Europe ready to act and a united, strong NATO also mean that not just 2% of our gross internal product is made available for that.
So our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase, was there following that press conference where the Chancellor and Foreign Minister spoke. Nina, this has been a long time in the making. What do we see in this strategy here exactly?
Well, they're actually still speaking here behind me in central Berlin. And it is an attempt, the very first attempt by a German government to give the country a national security strategy. Now, that is something that other countries, other democracies around the world have, but Germany didn't. Germany is a very decentralized country, you have to keep in mind, with lots of responsibility in the regions, with a fear of giving too much power to one single person. Now, that's, of course, a lesson from the past, from the Nazi past, where the Hitler regime essentially caused havoc and destruction around the world because too much power was centralized. And at the same time, now the government is beginning to understand we need to coordinate all the relevant actors when it comes to safeguarding security and stability in this country. We need to coordinate them better. We need to identify where the risks are and what we can do about it. And they've identified three big keywords, essentially. They say we need to step up defense capabilities, but we also need to focus on resilience, make our country more resilient, and on sustainability if we want to live in a secure and peaceful country. Now, lots of lessons, of course, from Russia's invasion against Ukraine, but not only. The Chancellor also said that the world and the global security order is changing. It is becoming more multipolar, which is why such a need for a national security strategy was felt by this government.
Yeah, let's look more at the defense aspect there. This strategy also appears to include a pledge from Germany to invest over 2% of economic output on defense. Is this really the Zeitenwende, the turning of an era that Scholz promised for German foreign policy after the invasion of Ukraine?
Well, 3 days after Russia launched its full-scale invasion against Ukraine, on the 27th of February last year, Olaf Scholz gave this big speech where he spoke of this tectonic shift that Russia's invasion against Ukraine meant also for Germany, that Germany had to rethink a lot. And at the time, he announced this special budget for the German armed forces because the German army was very poorly equipped. For years, Germany had been living off the peace dividend and thinking that threats were few and far beyond. And now Germany in this paper is for the very first time putting down in writing that it does commit to the 2% GDP spending goal that NATO has asked for years. And Germany says it wants to fulfill this commitment over a couple of years. So in 1 year you can spend 1% of GDP on defense, but then you can make up for that if you spend 4% on defense in the coming years.
Another huge player on the world stage. Let's talk about China. Germany also today has called China a partner competitor and systemic rival. What more can you tell us about that?
Now, they always use these three terms when they refer to China, but what is interesting is that in this paper, the paragraph, two things are interesting. The paragraph on China is very short, and that can be explained by the fact that the government is simultaneously also working on a specific China strategy. We're expecting that to be released in early July. Next week, there are going to be German-Chinese consultations between cabinet members of the German government, but also Chinese ministers are going to be flying in here to Berlin, so we'll find out a lot more detail then. And the second thing, of course, is interesting that in this paper, in the national security strategy presented today, the stress is going to be more on China as a systemic rival and a competitor and less as a partner.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed there. That is DW's chief political correspondent, Nina Haza. Many thanks. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Neil Schmid, a member of the German parliament from Chancellor Scholz's Social Democratic Party. He is also the spokesperson on foreign affairs for the SPD. Now, other democracies have long had national security strategies. Why has it taken so long for Germany to agree to its very first?
Well, for many years, German foreign policy did not follow a whole-of-government approach, and it was rather less active in the international arena. So there was no real need to have such kind of a strategy. And we were satisfied with having some sectoral strategies relating to civilian cooperation, to civilian conflict prevention. There was a white book on defense. But it was necessary, even before the start of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, to have this comprehensive approach, this idea of integrated security, which is now the kernel of this new strategy. And so I'm very glad that this government, that this chancellor has adopted this strategy now.
So what does this mean for Germany's allies? Does this signal that Berlin is now ready to step into more of a leadership role?
Well, it very clearly signals to our allies our commitment to NATO, to the European Union, to the multilateral international order, which is very important after the beginning of this terrible war by Russia in Ukraine. It also gives our allies a strong commitment that Germany is ready to engage in international diplomacy, but that it follows a very comprehensive approach, meaning that we recognize the nexus between climate change and security issues, that we are also ready to step up our efforts in cyber defense issues, and that we are also ready to tackle very German domestic issues like the constitutional problems arising between the federal level and the state level when it comes to certain types of new hybrid threats to our national security.
Now tell me more about how sustainability fits into national security. What does the strategy foresee there?
Well, we are well aware of the fact that climate change affects all of us and affects especially continents like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So there's the idea behind this strategy to reach out for partnerships with as many countries as possible in the global south to develop just energy transition partnerships, meaning to help them to turn away from fossil fuel, from oil and gas, towards renewable energies, and to help them to transform not only energy production, but also the whole of their economic life and transportation systems. We believe that this is an issue of international equality which needs to be addressed right now, and where Germany can weigh in with its technology and with its experience back home.
Now, looking again at defense, this strategy also contains a pledge for Germany to spend 2% of GDP on defense. This is not the huge changing of an era or Zeitenwende that Scholz promised after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, though, is it?
Well, it repeats a commitment that was pronounced by Chancellor Scholz more than 1 year ago. It is not the replacement, the assets for a federal budget, which will be debated this year, later in autumn. But you can be assured, and our allies can be assured, of our commitment to this 2% goal, since we have a 100 billion euro fund that is being spent right now by buying huge amounts of weaponry, for example, F-35 fighter planes, Chinook helicopters, and so on. So this strategy is not about individual lawmaking, it's not about the budget. This is still to be debated and voted by Parliament in every single instance. But for the first time, an official governmental document elaborates and pledges to this 2% goal. I think this is also a very strong message to our NATO allies that Germany will follow up to this promise.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on DW News. That is Niels Schmidt, a lawmaker and spokesperson on foreign affairs for the Social Democratic Party. Many thanks.